Hello everyone. This week we are presenting on the film Train to Busan. We hope you all enjoy our presentation. Our presentation will start off with an introduction to the film and then our collective response, moving into our analysis, followed by a discussion question, and then into our three salient aspects, followed by another discussion question, and finally into our conclusion. Train to Busan is a 2016 action thriller film directed by Yeon Sung-ho. This film portrays the struggle of survival between life and death during a zombie apocalypse outbreak on a train from Seoul to Busan. The plot follows a divorced father and his daughter, along with other passengers who fight for their lives until the end. The father and daughter duo decide to go to Busan to visit Suani's mother. Little did they know that it would be a train ride that would change their lives. This film was recognized internationally and received many awards, and was a record-breaking film of all time in South Korea. Our response to the film. Train to Busan is a film that was very well executed with an amazing group of artists, and a film that we felt could not have been done any better. Train to Busan was a true thriller film from the beginning to the end and had everything from fear to tears. It was an amazing film that kept you on the edge of your seat, which focused a lot on character development and brought out the many realistic survival instincts of humans, whether it was being selfish or selfless, or the ability to adapt during a crisis or sacrifice your life for a loved one. The character and relationship development between the father and daughter was so heart-wrenching, as you can see how their relationship goes from being formal, which you can see from the way Suani talks to her dad at the beginning, to a truly comfortable and loving relationship by the end, which made their ending even more emotional. Suani singing at the end of the film was so heartbreaking. She couldn't finish the song in school because her dad wasn't there, and her finishing it at the end saved her life. Her father made a sacrifice that saved his daughter, and the song was almost like a tribute to him.
Considering the most memorable parts of the film, the first one definitely has to be the selflessness of the characters. Sungwa's character is a great example for this, as throughout the movie he's shown many times his selflessness to protect others. For example, there's a scene in slow motion where Sokwoo is running towards his daughter, who stands meters away from a swarm of attacking zombies. One zombie begins to run towards Suan, and right before Sokwoo realizes he won't be able to save his daughter, Sungwa fights off the zombie and saves her, despite barely knowing her. Sungwa's character is a great example for this, as throughout the movie he's shown many times his selflessness to protect others. For example, there's a scene in slow motion where Sokwoo is running towards his daughter, who stands meters away from a swarm of attacking zombies. One zombie begins to run towards Suan, and right before Sokwoo realizes he won't be able to save his daughter, Sungwa fights off the zombie and saves her, despite barely knowing her. The second most striking part of the film that we realized was the cause of the apocalypse. So the biggest question in any apocalyptic film is in regards to how it all began. Although in most films the answer is unclear or unknown, in Train to Busan, Sokwoo comes to a shocking realization along with its viewers. During one of the scenes, we can see Sokwoo on the phone with one of his colleagues trying to get updates. In this scene, we can hear his colleague crying as he explains to Sokwoo that because of the biotech shares that they sold, the biotech company released the virus. And although it's not 100% clear, but we can ultimately determine that the leading cause of the virus was unintentionally begun by Sokwoo and his business partners.
Class is seen as a means of survival, both in the film and reality. Wagner mentions the barometer of cultural anxiety, where it tracks a wide range of cultural, political, and economic anxieties. Cultural anxiety are also tied to the ways in which South Korea and societies worldwide now operate on a level of mere socioeconomic survival. In the film, class is seen often as people who are of higher class have more connections due to wealth, and that they were able to attain more information faster and find means of safety quicker, but only for themselves, which can be seen with the main character as well as the CEO on the train. Outbreak. In the film, lack of initial response is seen in effect, which made it difficult to contain. In the beginning of the film, we see how lacks the security or with the delivery truck driver. Even though there is an issue ahead, he lets the driver through without a care after some talking. The next scene, where the driver runs over the deer, can be seen as foreshadowing for the entire film. In the article, the writer mentions outbreaks and disasters are never something government can predict, but they are national emergencies that they should be prepared to handle. Whether filmic or real, responses are usually poor. He then gives an example of the Sewol ferry disaster, which will be talked about later. Globalization. In the reading, Wagner mentions the spread of trends through globalization by bringing together cultural trends faster due to 24/7 real-time entertainment sites, including chat rooms and current digital platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Google that alerts users to the hottest content. In the film, it is seen that many of the characters use Google as a means of source for information about the situation as well as local news sites.
Seok-woo's character can be seen going through many phases throughout the film. He's shown to be an uninvolved father and a fund manager who is viewed to be corrupt by the community. As mentioned earlier, he also may have unintentionally played a role in starting this pandemic. Despite all of this, he's also shown us a great deal of selflessness throughout the film as he goes through great lengths to protect his daughter and others around him. So for our first discussing question, we want to ask that given the knowledge you have on Seok-woo's character, would you consider him to be a protagonist or an antagonist, and why?
Now, starting off with the first salient aspect, disaster prevention. Throughout the film, there are numerous symbolic scenes which shadow the real-life lack in disaster prevention within Korea. Train to Busan draws directly from the horrifying Sewol ferry disaster of April 2014, where 304 people, of which 250 were high school students, perished on a capsized ferry at sea. This event marked a monumental moment for Korean society as the many families of those who lost protested and demanded answers from the government for this massive failure in safety. It was then revealed that through government corruption, the ferry had been licensed, although it was illegally modified to carry more cargo and failed to meet its regular safety checkups. Overall, lax regulation, poor safety inspections, and a slow and badly coordinated response were to blame. The owning company, Cheonghaejin Marine Corporation, barely addressed these corporation corruption and poor safety records, proving yet again how incompetent their team and regulations were in managing such disaster and how the idea of neoliberalism and the capitalist mindset cost the lives of many. In Train to Busan, this same incompetence is shown by Korean officials in numerous ways. The initial scenes showcase a symbol of a cruel joke to the shabbiness of Korean protocols with a safety dummy put in place to regulate entrance. As the KTX train takes off to Busan and the outbreak makes its way to Daejeon, where they were told to stop and meet military officials, many are infected by an army of zombies who have quite obviously taken over the help they were expecting to be waiting at the station. These scenes show the viewer how miscommunication and lack of preparation by government officials result in the inability to properly contain and control this wild outbreak. Now moving on to the second salient aspect, elites versus ordinary families. The reading touches upon the idea of elites versus ordinary families and how neoliberalism falls into place on the KTX train by CEO Young-suk. After Seok-woo's group of survivors battles through the numerous cars of zombies, they are left locked out of the cart of other remaining survivors and told to fend for themselves out of CEO Young-suk's fear they are infected. Young-suk enforces his elite status in society amongst the ordinary people on the train and convinces them to follow his neoliberal views against the other passengers, which showcases strongly how those in power within Korea are trusted to make decisions on behalf of others. In more recent news, I found it interesting that although this film was released in 2016, it has re-emerged through a number of different articles linking its plotline to the recent COVID-19 pandemic. The way Young-suk's fears drives his actions is a very similar response we have seen during the pandemic, with essential workers and healthcare workers being isolated by their neighbors at the assumption that lower working classes carried the infection and were looked down upon by those with higher status roles that allowed them to stay home. The irrational decisions driven by fear and uncertainty in Train to Busan are more prevalent now than ever.
In Train to Busan, the Korean Ministry of Health and Welfare as news and information outlet, Kakao Talk, and the use of the KTX train localized the film and contained the disease to South Korea. We seek localization in the use of these outlets because it helps place the film in a specific area and creates more of a connection to Korea while keeping a Hollywood-style film. Whereas Hollywood movies and television shows like World War Z and The Walking Dead would use the World Health Organization, which people would associate with Western countries and movies.
Since the film is based on a nationwide apocalyptic pandemic, what kind of similarities can you notice between this pandemic and Train to Busan compared to our current global COVID-19 pandemic that we're facing?
As zombie movies don't usually stay on the shelf for long, this movie's unarguable success showcases that Train to Busan is not only iconic for being a great movie, but also for teaching the audience the importance of love, family, and sacrifice throughout the film. Starring a distant family and a few strangers, the three most noticeable themes are disaster prevention, where a lack of government preparation created more chaos, upper class entitlement, where a person of higher status has more power in decision making, even if it's not the right decision, and most importantly, the localization of this film that connected Hollywood like styles and formed a new subgenre of movies in Korea. While zombies are usually contained to American and European media, Train to Busan aids in expanding South Korea's horror genre and opening up to international viewers while still touching on social issues that remain native to Korea and preserving the essence of their own style.